But I would say again, we don't have enough engineers at this point in time.
The contractors has been a challenge in this country.
In the tendering, we are the lowest price.
I don't think the industry really has the funds to challenge these people.
The reason the industry is not growing is fourfold. First, there is no culture of industrialization in whole of sub-Saharan Africa.
Challenges we faced before this project kicked off was basically trying to get a permission from the forest, NEMA.
There should be internal attachments and internships. There's too much theory as compared to practical.
We have heard in the past that some courses or universities haven't been accredited by the Engineering Board of Kenya.
Key challenges for business today is to see how they can have enough capability and capacity as far as knowledge is concerned to be able to foretell.
Kenya has come a long way in development in a quest to becoming a medium-income country. However, that is just a tip of the iceberg of the many possibilities we could become. A lot of the rural areas are yet to become industrialized. And one of the challenges that we have is we have so many graduate engineers who are yet to become engineers. These are just some of the challenges that will get unfolded here. And today joining us, we have authorities and experts and professionals in the world of engineering to help us unfold some of these questions and come up with possible solutions to this discussion. Thank you, panelists, for joining us. And thank you at home for also joining us and watching this show. It's awesome, the amazing world of engineers. And my name is Esther Nemath. So on the extreme left, we have Engineer Nicholas Musuni, who is from the Kenya Engineers Board, and we have the president here from the Institution of Kenya Engineers, and we have Engineer Grace Onyango, also representative from the board. So thank you once again for joining. Yes, so maybe you should introduce yourself. We'll start from the left with Engineer Nicholas.
My name is Engineer Nicholas Musuni. I'm the Registrar and the Chief Executive Officer of the Engineers Board of Kenya. Thank you for having us here.
Yes, you're welcome.
My name is Engineer Michael Okonji. I'm the President of the Institution of Engineers of Kenya. Thank you also for having us here.
You're welcome.
And my name is Engineer Grace Onyango. I'm a board member of the Engineers Board of Kenya.
Welcome to the show. What is the state of engineers in Kenya, engineering and engineers in the country at the moment?
I'll start off with, because you cannot talk about engineering unless you touch on engineers themselves.
Certainly, yes.
And the situation at the moment is, one thing that you probably would want to know is that in the institution, we take care of the welfare of the engineers. But the engineers must be brought to us from the Engineers Board of Kenya, because that is the regulatory body which actually licenses engineers. But in terms of numbers, we are not doing very well. And particularly the engineers who are allowed to practice. And but worse than that, also in terms of gender, we have very few female engineers, comparatively more male engineers. But I think we are doing something out to make sure that we deal with that.
You deal with that, okay.
And so at the institution at the moment, we are aggressively going out, starting with schools. In fact, we have programs that go to secondary schools where we try to encourage people to study engineering so that we can have more engineers. We go out to the universities to explain to them the benefits of being engineers. We have actually also aggressively tried to deal with the gender. So we have a women's wing of the Engineering Institute of Engineers of Kenya, which goes out deliberately to convince the young females to become engineers, and we hope that in the long run we'll have more engineers. That is as far as engineers are concerned. And as far as engineering is concerned, the engineers that we have are very able and capable, and they're doing a wonderful job, be it in roads, all that things, the practices that you see around here are done by our own homegrown engineers. They may have people coming out as consultants from outside, but your homegrown engineers in roads, in building services. You see big structures coming up, and you'll be surprised. They were all done by our engineers, and they're doing very well.
We can go on with you.
Okay. I think the state of engineering is wide. There are different sectors within engineering which are completely independent, but they have to come together so that it makes up the world of engineering as we know it. There's a sector of education where, as engineer says, everybody starts in. Then there's the sector of employment, whether it's professional, whether you end up in an engineering field or not. There's also that specific sector we need to look at. So there's the training bit, there's the post-training bit, and then there is the employability bit. So I think Kenya is there's so much that's evolving in these various sectors, and the engineers are needed in every specific sector. As it is right now, a lot of policy is needed for every single sector that is coming up in the world of engineering. For instance, we have the agricultural sector, we have the mining sector, we have the built environment, as engineer is talking about. We have the education sector, which is, I think we'll delve into about, and I think the registrar will talk a little bit more about that, because all these areas need to be streamlined and come together. So I think we are at a point where policy needs to be a very strong issue in the world of engineering, so that it can guide the paces that are set in every specific sector. As engineer rightfully says, we have again different numbers in the different categories of engineering, and we will talk about that, whether you're a consulting engineer, a professional engineer, a graduate engineer, and your path from the time you get into the world of engineering in academia to when you graduate as an engineer, and to when you get training and experience in whatever engineering field that you end up in, and to the point when now you become a professional engineer and a consulting engineer. And then there's issues to do again with gender, because we will share some numbers with you a little later on. And how do we encourage the ladies to come into the world of engineering, because there are those of us who are in it, there are those of us who have done it, and there are those of us, it's our bread and butter, our daily bread and butter, and it's a good world. And when we get into education, at what level do we start introducing engineering? Do we start it at kindergarten, through to primary, through to high school, through to university, so that the young ones know what to expect in the world of engineering even as they're coming up? You had raised the issue of capacity. Do we have the numbers? How do we build the numbers? Where do we start building the numbers from? So that's what I think.
So let's have Engineer Nicholas Musuni sharing on the state of engineers and engineering, since they actually pass through your institution before they go to his end. So they actually come to you raw as graduates. So what is the state of engineers and engineering in Kenya at the moment, in your view?
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I think the first thing I would want to note is that the state of engineering largely reflects the state of an economy. If an economy is very vibrant, you'll also see the engineering sector being vibrant, because in essence engineering is supposed to meet the needs of the society. So that if the economy is growing at a higher rate, then the economy will also be demanding for these professional services, and really not engineering alone. We are talking about other professionals that work with engineers. And therefore, we find ourselves in a situation where at times the economy is growing too fast in relation to how fast we are producing the engineers to serve that economy. So we have a situation where we would be saying we have a challenge in terms of meeting the needs of the economy, and that's where the board comes in, and that's where the government comes in to look at how well we can address the issue of giving the requisite professionals for the economy. So it's vibrant as it is now, and we've looked at our statistics, and as a matter of fact, a third of the engineers that we have in our registers have actually been registered as so as professional engineers in the last 10 years. We've been having engineers training for very many years.
But the registration process?
The last 10 years accounts for a third, and that tells you then that the last 10 years has been so vibrant to have these opportunities for engineers to register and become professionals. So in a nutshell, the state of engineering, you can very easily relate it with the state of economies, be it at the education level, as engineer has pointed out, massive expansion of engineering education, the last 10 years maybe again, reflecting the larger state of the society and the economy.
The larger state of this. And I like what you've mentioned, that you've said the state of the need will necessitate the state of, I mean, the number of professionals that you will be producing into the market.
Precisely.
Yes.
Because as you are going into new fields, it also means that you need new engineers in those fields. And that poses also a challenge to us. How do we get these new engineers to address those new needs that are coming up?
So you must admit that sort of the development, the fast development, has sort of caught the engineering world a little bit off guard, that you need a lot of engineers and we have very few at the moment.
I wouldn't say
registered.
Off guard. I wouldn't say off guard.
Yes.
But making an engineer calls for a lot of resources. Training an engineer in Kenya, for instance, would take a minimum of 5 years. So if we are going into a new field today, you can only have a graduate engineer coming out from that field in the next 5 years. And after that, then they also need to be trained, hands-on experience, for them to become professional engineers.
Wow.
That's the challenge that we
That's the challenge that we are facing now. And I think that is one of the bigger challenges that, yes, right now it will take a lot of time, it takes quite some time, but I think it's the same situation worldwide, that the engineering profession takes a while before you are actually registered enough to practice. But is it a lot slower in Kenya in terms that we only have probably 2,000 registered? Is it still 2,000 at the moment? 2,000 registered engineers?
2,000 professional engineers. Maybe to get the statistic right, we have 2,000 approximately, I think 1,988 professional and consulting engineers against 8,300 plus graduate engineers
that are waiting to be registered.
So the total engineering fraternity within our registers, there could be more outside, some not within our registers, but at least the ones that we have in our registers is 10,300 plus.
10,300 plus.
It is taking too much long period, inordinately long, for us to transit from the graduate engineer level to the professional engineers.
Yes,
there are very many issues to be addressed and reasons behind this.
Why. Do you know any of these reasons that make the transition process so long, that delays, for example, the engineers from coming, ready to practice and ready to supervise the projects, perhaps?
As I mentioned earlier, we as professionals, we need to make sure that there is a clear path from the time you get into university and from the time you graduate and till the time you get into a professional engineer. Now, once you graduate, of course you need to get a job, and that's where there's a bit of a disconnect, because as one graduates, it's not immediately that you're going to get a job, and that's where we need industry policies to come together with academia to make sure that the path is very clear for this young engineer. Once that engineer graduates to the time they're going to get a job, the person is very clear in their mind. But as it is in Kenya, as any other profession, once you graduate, you have to look for a job for quite a long time. And also within our act, by the time you get the job, by the time you get that training experience, it's a space of time. And also getting the job, are you in the right path? Because there are certain stipulations that you also have to meet and requirements that you also have to meet before you come and get registered as a professional engineer. And again, are you practicing under a professional engineer? Are you practicing under a consulting engineer, which is a prerequisite for you to come and register? And this is where we are saying the numbers are against us, because if we are graduating 8,000, yet in the register professional engineers are just about 1,900, depending on how they are distributed across the various engineering industry sectors. as a young engineer, what chance do you have to come in and register within the time? The other thing is, even if they get into some of these engineering firms, or they get a job in whatever engineering sector, does that employer have a structured training program that will prepare this young engineer to become a professional? So there has to be a link, a very strong one, between academia, our professional bodies, our regulator, and the employers, specifically in the engineering sector, that can prepare these engineers in the shortest time possible, so that they can come out and
they're ready.
And they're ready, and they come and they do their professional exams and they get registered.
Probably because both of you have mentioned about policy, and policy is an issue, yeah? So maybe each of you, do you have any suggestions to some of these policies that probably we could have to ensure that this is possible? Maybe we could start with you, Engineer Nicholas.
The board is really well seized of the matter. And as a matter of fact, the overall mandate of the board, besides the registration of engineers and the firms, is to regulate the profession and oversee its development in terms of training and capacity building. So what the board has done, with assistance from the International Development Agency of the IDA of World Bank, we've come up with a graduate engineers internship program. A policy is already in place, which specifically spells out what path a graduate engineer would take, and for how long, and what specific areas they need to be exposed to, so that they are ready to take that responsibility, and they are ready to go for the professional examinations. Typically, within that policy, we are looking at a period of between 2.5 years to 3 years, 30 to 36 months being sufficient to have an engineer who's well trained, taken through all the areas that they need to have exposure, and therefore become professional engineers. The next stage now where we are working on is resource mobilization, because as Engineer Okonji put it earlier, there is a cost element in the training of an engineer, especially at the workplace.
Yeah.
Training one at the workplace for 2.5 years to 3 years has quite some significant cost element, and that is where we are now working at the board with the government to see how we can have an internship program specifically to address the challenges that graduate engineers are going
Or then you can actually train them all in bulk, and they do not need to go look for alternative. That's where I'd like to lead us. Let's start with you, Engineer.
Thank you for the question.
Yes.
I think one of the things, and particularly at the institution which you are doing, is to demystify the engineering. You go out there, and you have to be good in math, you have to be good in sciences, and people say, "Oh, that's nothing for me." We are going out there and let them know you can do it, because others have done it. Engineer Grace here was, I think she was the youngest engineer that registered at that time, and she has been very helpful, telling engineers out there, look, I am a girl, I did it in the shortest time, and she's excelling out there. And so we are trying to demystify, actually we are trying to demystify that right from primary schools. When we go for our conferences, we deliberately choose to go to primary school and talk to those little kids and tell them, look, it's nice to be an engineer, you see, look at us, and you can do it. There's nothing hard with math, there's nothing, you just put your thing into it, and then from there, you develop them. And I think one of the things also that we do is to go to schools, secondary schools now, to tell them the beauty of an engineer, how it works. And it has made a lot of changes, because what some of them said, because for instance, if you talk about a mechanical engineer, we were in one of the schools, and they say, what, we think a mechanical engineer is somebody doing the vehicle. We told them, no, yes, all the mechanical engineers can do so many things, and it has a wide range of opportunities, and we let them know that the hope is that at the end of it, we'll have numbers and we'll have interests. One of the things also that we tell them is just like medicine, engineering. If you want to become a very rich person, you probably will not do engineering. You want to be happy and very confident to say, look, that is my work, and walk around it and say, look, that's my work. And the satisfaction of having a good work done that people can talk about in itself is much more than the benefit. So we try to do that, and we hope that that will make a change.
Just very briefly, I like what you said, that it's you see your work and you're actually very happy to see this is the work that I've done. So how can many more engineers come and get that feeling of that is my project and that is what I've done? How can we have more Kenyans doing the job that expatriates are doing as well? But you mentioned Kenyans are the ones doing the job, but how can we even now have the main supervisors being Kenyans as we project into the future? Just briefly as we close, so maybe we'll start with Engineer Nicholas, then Grace.
I think it's first to create the interest. The first step is to have the right numbers, create the interest right from the lowest levels. You don't need to wait until one is at the university. Actually, you create the interest at the primary school level. And I like what the Ministry of Education is doing, laying a lot of emphasis on sciences, technology, engineering, and mathematics areas, because those are the foundation for engineering and the practice and the studies.
Okay.
I think one of the things that the young engineers and prospective engineers need to know is that we now have a new act, Engineers Act 2011, which has protected the engineering profession, which is ensuring that the industry is actually adhering to the law, which means there are jobs that are being created through this act. It means not just anybody can come out there and come and take jobs. So the act has actually created space within the engineering industry for these young ones to come in and grow within it.
Has it had any impact from 2011 until now?
Oh yes, it has. It has in so many sectors. The biggest sector is education, where now they have to be taught the right thing and they have to be taken through the right things based on the benchmarking we have done and according to the Engineers Act. So all universities or any institution that's teaching anything relating to engineering knows that there are measures and they cannot just teach anything that they want.
Thank you for watching us. You have been watching Awesome, and I am your host, Esther Nema, and we have been talking about the state of engineering in Kenya. As you've had, many challenges are there, but there's still progress coming up for you engineers who are practicing or who are graduate and waiting to become registered. There is hope, and there's certainly a great future in the future for the world of engineers, and I hope that they stay true to their word and keep their promise, and you will be the next great engineer. Thank you.